The asphalt of Briar Glen tasted like oil and blood. Camden Sterling lay pinned beneath the crushing weight of an officer's knee, his breath breaking apart in ragged gasps. Above him, the flashing red and blue lights of the cruiser painted the suburban trees in violent bursts of color. "You think you're smart, boy?" the officer sneered, twisting Camden's wrist until the joint popped. "You think a suit makes you one of us?" Camden did not scream. He did not beg. He only closed his eyes and whispered 3 words that would bring an entire corrupt city hierarchy to its knees. "Call my father," because they had no idea who they were hurting. They did not know they had just declared war on the Attorney General. The vintage Shelby GT 500 moved through the winding roads of Briar Glen with a low, thunderous growl. It was a masterpiece of American engineering: midnight blue paint, polished chrome, and an engine that sounded like a storm trapped beneath the hood. Behind the wheel sat Camden Sterling. Camden was not the kind of young man who went looking for trouble. He was a pre-law student at a prestigious university, disciplined, intense, and serious in a way that often made him seem older than he was. He wore a fitted charcoal blazer over a white t-shirt, his tortoiseshell glasses sliding slightly down his nose as he checked the dashboard clock. "Dad is going to kill me," Camden muttered, though a small smile touched his mouth. He had promised to return the car before the night got too late. The Shelby was not just a car. It was Malcolm Sterling's pride and joy. Malcolm Sterling was known to the public as the Iron Hammer of the state justice system. He was the first black attorney general in the state's history, a man feared by corrupt officials, hated by crooked defense attorneys, and respected by anyone who understood the law. He also treated that vintage car with more tenderness than he showed most people in a courtroom. Camden had spent hours in the university library, buried in constitutional law case studies. He was exhausted. All he wanted was leftover lasagna, a quiet house, and a pillow. He signaled onto Sycamore Avenue, a wealthy, silent enclave where lawns were cut with obsessive precision and neighbors called the police if a dog barked too long after sunset. It was his neighborhood. He had grown up riding his bike on those sidewalks. Then the rearview mirror exploded with light. Camden's stomach dropped. A siren cut through the Shelby's rumble. "Damn it!" he hissed, tapping the steering wheel. He was not speeding. He knew that for a fact. He was driving exactly within the limit. Maybe a taillight was out. He pulled over carefully, easing the expensive tires against the curb so he would not scratch the rims. He killed the engine, rolled down the window, and placed both hands on top of the steering wheel, fingers spread wide. He knew the drill. Every black father in America gave his son the talk. Malcolm Sterling, despite his power and position, had been even more precise about it. "Badge number, demeanor, compliance," his father would say, his voice grave. "When you are pulled over, you are not Camden Sterling, the Attorney General's son. You are a suspect. Survive the stop. We litigate later." Camden watched the side mirror. 2 shadows moved away from the blinding glare of the cruiser's headlights. The first officer was a towering slab of a man with a thick neck and a buzz cut that looked like it had been done with sandpaper. This was Officer Bram Kessler. Inside the precinct, Kessler had a reputation. Camden did not know it yet, but Kessler was known for his numbers. He made more arrests than anyone else, mostly because he created reasons to make them. The second officer was younger, nervous, and restless, with one hand hovering near his holster. Officer Arden Vale, a rookie. Kessler walked to the driver's side, his flashlight cutting straight into Camden's eyes. Camden squinted, but he did not move his hands. "License and registration," Kessler barked. No greeting, no explanation, no question about why he had been stopped. "It is in the glove box, officer," Camden said, his voice steady and practiced. "I'm going to reach for it now." "Don't tell me what you're going to do," Kessler snapped. "Just do it." Camden moved slowly. He opened the glove compartment and the small light revealed a leather registration folder. He handed it over with his license. Kessler snatched both items. He shined the flashlight on the license, then at Camden, then around the interior of the car. His eyes lingered on the leather seats, the custom dashboard, and finally, Camden's blazer. "Camden Sterling," Kessler read with a mocking tone. He looked at the registration. "Car belongs to Malcolm Sterling. Who is that? Your daddy?" "Yes, sir," Camden said politely. I am heading home. I live nearby. Kessler let out a sharp, dry laugh. He turned to Vale, who was standing near the passenger window, peering inside. You hear that, Vale? He lives in a rich neighborhood and drives a car worth more than most people's houses. Nice ride, Vale muttered, unsure of himself. Kessler leaned closer. His breath smelled like stale coffee and aggression. You know, Camden, we have had a lot of stolen luxury vehicles around here lately. Expensive car, young kid, late-night drive. It does not add up. I did not steal it, Camden said, fighting the urge to frown. It is my father's car. You can run the plates. The address on my license matches the registration. I can run whatever I want, Kessler interrupted. Step out of the car. Camden's heart skipped. Officer, am I under arrest? I have not committed a traffic violation. I said step out of the car. Kessler's voice dropped into something colder and more dangerous. Camden hesitated for only a fraction of a second. That was all Kessler needed. The door was ripped open before Camden could unbuckle. Kessler's hand clamped around Camden's upper arm. With a violent jerk, he hauled him out of the low-slung sports car. Camden stumbled, his dress shoes slipping on the gravel near the curb. Okay, I'm out, Camden said, his hands shooting up. I'm out. Stop resisting, Kessler roared. He spun Camden around and slammed him chest first onto the hood of the Shelby. The sound of metal bending, even slightly, sent a spike of horror through Camden. Dad's car. I'm not resisting, Camden gasped, his cheek pressed against the cold metal. Check the dash cam. I am complying. Pat him down, Vale, Kessler ordered, pinning Camden's neck with his forearm. The rookie stepped forward and searched Camden's legs, waist, and pockets. He pulled out a sleek phone and a leather wallet. Clean, Sarge, Vale said. Just a phone and wallet. Check the car, Kessler commanded. Officer, Camden said, forcing panic out of his voice. He knew the law. He knew it better than these two officers did. You need probable cause to search the vehicle. I do not consent to a search. Kessler leaned close to Camden's ear. Probable cause is whatever I say it is. I smell marijuana. You absolutely do not, Camden shot back, his indignation finally breaking through his fear. I do not smoke. This car has never been smoked in. You calling me a liar? The air around them seemed to freeze. A dog barked somewhere in the distance, lonely and unaware of the violence gathering on the street. Kessler grabbed a fistful of Camden's hair and yanked his head back. You call me a liar, boy? I know my rights, Camden said through clenched teeth, wincing from the pain in his scalp. Fourth Amendment violation, unlawful detainment, civil rights liability. If you damage this car, you will be held responsible. Kessler laughed. It was a dark, ugly sound. We've got a lawyer here, Vale, a little jailhouse lawyer. He kicked Camden's legs apart harder than necessary, forcing his stance wide enough to strain his muscles. Then, with a swift, practiced motion, he handcuffed him. The metal bit deep into Camden's wrists. You're under arrest, Kessler said. For what? Camden shouted. Disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, and... Kessler paused and looked at the rookie. Vale, find something in that car. Vale looked at Camden, then at Kessler. Sarge, the car looks clean. Maybe we just write him up for the taillight and... I said search the damn car, Kessler barked. Tear it apart if you have to. Camden watched in horror as Vale opened the passenger door. The rookie dug through the glove box and threw the owner's manual onto the floor. He lifted the floor mats and pushed into the upholstery. Stop, Camden yelled. That is a classic. You are tearing the interior. Shut him up, Kessler muttered. He grabbed Camden by the back of the blazer and hauled him away from the car toward the curb. Then he swept Camden's legs. Camden hit the ground hard. The air burst from his lungs. His shoulder took the impact, grinding into the asphalt. Stay down, Kessler said, resting one hand near his baton. Camden gasped for air, staring up at the night sky. Warm blood trickled down his temple where his skin had scraped the pavement. He needed to be smart. He needed to de-escalate. Officer, Camden wheezed. My father's name is Malcolm Sterling. Please, just check the name. I do not care if your daddy is the Pope, Kessler spat, looming over him like a gargoyle. Tonight, you belong to me. Vale returned from the car holding a small clear plastic bag. His face had gone pale. Sarge, he said, I found this under the seat. Camden squinted. It was a bag of white powder. "No," he whispered, his blood turning cold. "That is not mine. That is impossible. The car was detailed. That is not mine." Kessler grinned. It was the satisfied smile of a predator. "Well, look at that. We got ourselves a trafficker, narcotics possession, transporting with intent to distribute." "You planted that!" Camden screamed, struggling against the cuffs. "He planted that! I saw him reach into his pocket before he went under the seat." Kessler's boot slammed into Camden's ribs. A sharp crack split the quiet street. Pain exploded through Camden's side, bright and blinding. He curled into himself, gasping, unable to draw a full breath. "That is for accusing an officer of the law," Kessler said calmly. Then he looked at Vale. "Get him in the back. We are taking him to the precinct." "And Vale?" "Yes, Sarge," the rookie said, his voice trembling. "Turn off your body cam. Battery-saving mode." Camden lay on the ground with the taste of copper in his mouth. His ribs felt like fire. Through blurred vision, he watched Vale hesitate. Then the rookie reached up and tapped the camera on his chest. The blinking red light went dark. They dragged Camden upright. His legs felt weak as they shoved him toward the cruiser. He looked back at the Shelby one last time. The door was open. Papers were scattered everywhere. His father's prized possession had been violated. But as they pushed his head down and forced him into the back of the police car, Camden's mind became strangely clear. The pain remained, but something colder had taken over. Resolve. He looked Kessler directly in the eye. "You made a mistake," Camden said softly. Kessler slammed the door in his face. Inside the cage of this cruiser, the smell of old vomit and disinfectant was suffocating. Camden leaned his head against the plexiglass divider. His phone was in the front seat, confiscated. He had no way to call anyone, but he knew where they were taking him. And he knew something Kessler did not. Malcolm Sterling was not at home waiting for his car. He was attending a state judiciary gala, seated near the governor and the chief of police. If Camden could get one phone call, just one, everything would change. The cruiser's engine roared to life. They pulled away from the curb, leaving the blue Shelby abandoned on the roadside like a silent witness to the crime committed by men wearing badges. The ride to the precinct was a blur of shadows and passing streetlights. Each burst of light illuminated the grim reality of Camden's situation. The hard plastic seat offered no traction. With his hands cuffed behind his back, Camden slid helplessly from side to side, his bruised shoulder striking the door panel whenever Kessler took a turn too aggressively. Up front, the air carried a toxic kind of camaraderie. "Did you see his face?" Kessler chuckled, the sound vibrating through the divider. "Looked like he was going to cry when I found the bag. They always cry. Rich kid defense mechanism." "Yeah," Vale replied, though his voice had no conviction. He stared out the passenger window, avoiding the rearview mirror. "He knew the law, though, Sarge. Specific citations. That was not random." "They all watch crime shows," Kessler scoffed. "Knowing legal phrases does not stop cuffs from clicking. Besides, who is a judge going to believe? Some kid with a bag of powder in a stolen car? Or a decorated sergeant with a long career?" Camden forced himself to breathe through his nose. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. His father had taught him that before his first mock trial competition. Panic was the enemy. Panic ruined judgment. He needed to catalog everything. Officer Bram Kessler, badge number 4922. Officer Arden Vale, rookie insignia, injuries, temple wound, rib trauma, wrist cuts from over-tightened cuffs, bruised shoulder, body cam turned off after arrest, evidence allegedly found after unlawful search. The cruiser slowed and passed through the chain-link gates of the precinct sallyport. The heavy door rolled shut behind them with the final sound of a tomb closing. Kessler killed the engine. The silence that followed felt heavy. "All right, counselor," Kessler said, opening the back door. "Welcome to the Hilton." He grabbed Camden by the collar of his expensive blazer, now torn and dirty, and yanked him out. Camden's knees nearly buckled before he found his footing. The pain in his side was sharp and animal-like, biting with every movement. They marched him through the rear entrance. The precinct smelled of floor wax, stale coffee, and unwashed bodies. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead with a maddening buzz. They passed a holding cell where two men argued loudly. A drunk woman sat on a bench singing a hymn with one shoe missing. Officers moved through the halls with tired indifference, carrying paperwork and coffee cups. Kessler paraded Camden through booking like a hunter showing off a kill. "What do you have there, Sarge?" asked a heavy-set officer leaning against a filing cabinet, chewing a toothpick. "Big bust," Kessler said, shoving Camden forward so hard he nearly tripped. "Possession with intent. Caught him rolling in a Shelby, probably stolen, though the plates have not come back hot yet. Kid claims he is royalty." The heavy-set officer laughed. "They all claim royalty when the cuffs come out." Camden kept his head down, not from shame, but to hide the burning rage in his eyes. He saw how they looked at him. They did not see a student. They did not see a son. They did not see a human being. They saw a statistic, a bonus, a story to tell later. They reached the booking desk. The desk sergeant was a woman with graying hair pulled into a severe bun. Her nameplate read, Sergeant Marisol Reyes. She did not look up from her computer. "Name?" "Camden Sterling," Kessler answered for him. "I can speak," Camden rasped. His throat was dry and tasted like dust. He looked at the woman. "My name is Camden Sterling." Reyes looked up. Her tired eyes scanned him. Torn blazer, blood on his forehead, cuffs cutting into his wrists. "Date of birth?" Camden gave the information. "Address?" "Crestview Drive." Reyes paused. Her fingers stopped moving. She knew the neighborhood. Everyone knew Crestview. Judges lived there. Senators, tech executives, people with lawyers on speed dial. She looked at Kessler with one eyebrow raised. "Crestview? He claims he lives there," Kessler said with a shrug. "Probably the gardener's kid taking the boss's car for a joyride. Found powder under the seat." "I did not possess narcotics," Camden said firmly, staring directly at the camera mounted in the corner of the room. Officer Kessler planted evidence after an unlawful search. "I am injured, and I am requesting medical attention." Kessler leaned in, his voice low and dangerous. "You keep flapping your gums, kid, and you are going to trip on your way to the cell." "Accidents happen," Reyes sighed. She had seen scenes like this too many times. She did not know the truth, and part of her did not want to know. She just wanted to survive her shift. "Book him," she said. "Mugshot, then holding cell 2. It is empty." "I want my phone call," Camden said. Kessler laughed. "You get a call when we say you get a call. Right now, phones are down. Isn't that right, Reyes?" It was a test, a corruption test. Kessler was daring her to contradict him. Reyes looked at Camden, then at Kessler. She saw the bruising on the young man's face. She saw the quality of his clothes. She saw the eagerness in Kessler's eyes, the kind that suggested he was looking for another round. "Phones work fine, Bram," Reyes said flatly. "Process him, then let him make the call. I am not having the captain chew me out because you wanted to play games." Kessler's jaw tightened. He glared at Reyes, then spat on the floor. "Fine. Let's get the pictures. Smile for the camera, superstar." The humiliation of booking was designed to strip away identity. First came property. Camden watched as his wallet, phone, watch, and belt were tossed into a plastic bin. They took his shoelaces. "So you don't hurt yourself," Vale mumbled, avoiding Camden's eyes. Then came fingerprints. His hands, usually used to turn the thin pages of law textbooks, were grabbed roughly. Ink rolled over his fingertips. Press, roll, lift. The black ink stained his skin like a brand. Then came the photo. "Stand against the wall," Kessler barked. Camden stood. Though he was tall, he felt small beneath the cold gray height chart behind him. "Chin up, look forward." Flash. The light burned his image into the system. Camden Sterling. Criminal. "All right," Kessler said, grabbing Camden's arm again. "Cell time." "My call," Camden said. He did not move. He planted his feet. Kessler stopped. The air in the room grew thin. "You really are pushing your luck." "Sergeant Reyes said I get a call," Camden replied, looking past Kessler to the desk. "Sergeant, I know my rights. State law guarantees access to completed phone calls within the legally required window. I want to make one." Kessler looked ready to strike him again. His hand twitched near his baton. "Let him call, Bram." Reyes called from the desk without looking up. "Get it over with so we can put him in the tank." Kessler sneered and shoved Camden toward a wall-mounted phone near the cells. It was an old metal box with a short steel-corded handset. "You do not have long," Kessler hissed. "And if I hear you crying to your mommy, I disconnect it myself." He stood close, too close, listening, intimidating. Camden picked up the receiver. His hands were shaking now, the adrenaline giving way to shock. His ink-stained fingers hovered over the keypad. He knew only one number that mattered. He dialed. Ring, ring, ring. Camden closed his eyes. "Pick up. Please pick up." The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton glowed beneath Austrian crystal chandeliers. Warm golden light washed over silk gowns, black tuxedos, polished silverware, and faces that belonged to people who moved policy with quiet words. The air smelled of expensive perfume, truffle oil, and old money. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Malcolm Sterling sat at the head table with a glass of sparkling water in his hand. He was a commanding presence, broad-shouldered, neatly bearded, and sharp-eyed enough to dissect a witness from across a courtroom. His tuxedo cost more than some officers made in a quarter of a year. To his right sat the governor. To his left sat Chief of Police Roland Knox. "Crime rates are down, Malcolm," Knox said while cutting into his steak. "My people are doing good work. Aggressive policing works." Malcolm swirled his water. "Aggressive can be effective, Roland, provided it remains constitutional. Excessive force complaints have been climbing. I am watching it." Knox chuckled and wiped his mouth with a linen napkin. "You lawyers worry too much. Sometimes you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet." Malcolm was about to answer when he felt his phone vibrate inside his jacket. He frowned. He rarely kept his phone on during formal events, but he was waiting for an important legal call. He pulled out the device. The screen did not show the office. It showed a photo of his son smiling in a graduation cap. "Camden." Malcolm held up one finger to the governor. "Excuse me, my son. I need to take this." He answered and brought the phone to his ear. "Camden, you are late. You better have a flat tire." "Dad?" The voice on the other end was small, broken. It was a voice Malcolm had not heard since his son was a child, and had fallen from a tree in the backyard. Malcolm stood so abruptly, the governor stopped speaking. "Camden, what is wrong?" His voice dropped, losing its social warmth and becoming sharp, clinical, dangerous. "Dad, I'm at the precinct." Malcolm moved away from the table toward the terrace doors. "The precinct? Why? Were you in an accident?" "No." Camden's voice cracked. "I was pulled over. Dad, they beat me." Malcolm Sterling stopped. The world around him vanished. The music, the laughter, the clinking glasses, all of it disappeared beneath the sound of blood rushing in his ears. "Who?" Malcolm whispered. "Officer Kessler and a rookie named Vale. They pulled me over near Sycamore. They slammed me into the hood. They kicked my ribs. Dad, they planted drugs." "Drugs?" Malcolm repeated, as if the word belonged to another language. "White powder under the seat. They turned off their body cams, Dad. They turned them off before putting me in the car." Through the phone, Malcolm heard a harsh voice in the background. "Time's up, drug lord. Hang it up." "I have to go," Camden whispered, panic rising. "They are putting me in a cell. I did not do it, Dad. I swear." "Camden," Malcolm said. His voice was no longer only a father's voice. It was the Attorney General's voice, terrifyingly calm, deep, full of annihilation. "Listen to me. Say nothing. Sign nothing. Do not speak to anyone. Do you understand?" "Yes," Camden sobbed. "I'm coming." The line went dead. Malcolm lowered the phone slowly and stared at the black screen. His hand trembled, not from fear, but from rage so pure it felt ancient. Then he turned back toward the ballroom. He walked to the head table. The governor looked up, smiling. "Everything all right?" "Teenager trouble," Malcolm said. But he did not sit. He stood over the table, casting a long shadow across Chief Knox. "Roland," Malcolm said. The chief looked up and immediately sensed the shift in the air. His smile disappeared. "Malcolm, what is it? You look like you have seen a ghost." "Your officers have my son." "What?" Knox blinked. "Arrested for what?" "For driving while black in my car," Malcolm said. His voice rose, cutting across the room like a jagged blade. "They beat him. They planted evidence. And they turned off their body cameras." A hush fell across the gala. The string quartet stopped playing. "Malcolm, surely there is a misunderstanding," Knox began, standing. "Officer Bram Kessler, Officer Arden Vale, precinct holding cells." Malcolm had memorized the names instantly. Then he turned to the governor. "Governor, I am declaring a conflict of interest in all matters involving that precinct effective immediately, because I am about to tear it down to the foundation." He looked back at the chief. "Get your car, Roland." It was not a request. It was an order from the highest legal authority in the state. "You are driving me there now." "Malcolm, wait. If my son has one more bruise on him when I arrive than he had when he called me," Malcolm said, leaning close until his face was inches from Knox's, "I will indict every person in that building. Move." Malcolm Sterling turned and marched toward the exit. He did not get his coat. He did not say goodbye. He walked out of the ballroom with the force of a hurricane making landfall, and a few steps behind him, pale and sweating, hurried the chief of police. Inside Holding Cell 2, time had lost meaning. There were no windows, only the maddening hum of a fluorescent light protected by a wire cage. Camden sat on the steel bench with his elbows on his knees and his head low. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a jagged landscape of pain. His ribs throbbed with every shallow breath. His temple was swollen and hot. His wrists burned beneath the cuff's marks. But the physical pain was not the worst part. The fear was. Camden was a law student. He understood how damage worked. Once a charge entered the system, it became a stain that never fully disappeared. Even if cleared, the arrest record would exist. The mugshot would exist. Possession with intent. That kind of accusation could destroy a future before it even began. He looked at his trembling hands and clasped them together. His father always said, "The law is logic, not emotion." But logic did not work with Bram Kessler. Out in the bullpen, separated from the cells by a heavy security door, the mood was relaxed. The officers were settling into the quiet rhythm of a late shift. Kessler sat at his desk, typing an arrest report with two thick fingers. Suspect exhibited aggressive behavior. Suspect refused lawful commands. Narcotics discovered in plain view. He took a sip of lukewarm coffee and smirked. It was fiction, but to him it was a masterpiece. He was not a criminal in his own mind. He was a hero. "Sarge!" Kessler did not look up. "What is it, Vale? You finished logging the evidence?" Vale stood near the desk, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He looked sick. "Yeah, it is logged. But Sarge, I have been thinking." "Careful. You might hurt yourself." "The car," Vale said, lowering his voice. The registration really did match the kid's license and address. Crestview. People there have lawyers ready to go. Kessler stopped typing. His chair squeaked as he slowly turned. His eyes were cold and dead. "Let me explain something to you, Vale," Kessler said. "You think rich kids are innocent because they live in big houses? Those are the worst ones. They think they are untouchable." "But the bag," Vale whispered. "Sarge, I saw you. Before you went under the seat, your hand went to your vest pocket. I just—" Kessler stood. He moved close enough to swallow Vale's personal space. "You saw nothing," he hissed. "You saw excellent police work. You saw a veteran officer trusting his gut. You saw a felony arrest that is going to look very good in your file when review comes." He poked Vale in the chest with a thick finger. "We are the thin blue line. We protect society from garbage. Sometimes garbage drives a Shelby. Sometimes it drives a Honda. It does not matter. We take it out. Are we clear?" Vale swallowed. Guilt twisted in his stomach, but fear twisted harder. Fear of Kessler. Fear of being frozen out by the precinct. Fear of becoming a traitor to the Brotherhood. "We're clear, Sarge," he mumbled. "Good. Now go get me something to eat." Kessler sat back down, satisfied. He returned to the report and typed the final sentence. He hit save with a flourish, leaned back, and interlaced his fingers behind his head. "Quiet night," he muttered. "Just the way I like it." He had no idea the quiet was not peace. It was the vacuum before an explosion. The automatic glass doors of the precinct entrance slid open with a soft whoosh, At that hour, the only people who usually came through those doors were exhausted cops, frightened victims, or drunks being dragged in by the elbow. The lobby air was stale, heavy with floor wax and apathy. But when Malcolm Sterling crossed the threshold, the air pressure seemed to drop. He did not run. He did not shout. He walked with terrifying precision, the heels of his dress shoes clicking against the linoleum like the ticking of a bomb. His black tuxedo stood in sharp contrast against the dull beige walls. His face was a mask of granite. Behind him came Chief Roland Knox, looking like a man walking toward his own execution. His face was pale and damp with sweat. His uniform looked unsettled from the rushed drive. Sergeant Reyes sat at the front desk, staring at a crossword puzzle. She heard the footsteps first, too confident, too purposeful. She looked up, already annoyed. Then her mouth fell open. The pen dropped from her hand. She did not see a father. She saw the man whose face appeared on the news, whose signature sat at the bottom of funding documents, whose office could make entire departments tremble. The Attorney General of the state. And he looked like he had come to burn the building down. "Mr. Sterling," Reyes stammered, scrambling to stand. Her chair rolled back and struck the filing cabinet with a loud clang. Malcolm did not stop until he reached the counter. He placed both hands on the surface. His knuckles were white. "Where is he?" His voice was not loud. It was a low, resonant rumble that seemed to vibrate through the desk. "Sir, my son," Malcolm said, pronouncing every word with deadly clarity. "Camden Sterling. He was brought in. Where is he?" Reyes's eyes darted to the computer screen, then to the heavy security door leading into the back. "He is in holding cell 2. But, sir, you cannot go back there. It is restricted." "Sergeant!" A voice barked from behind Malcolm. Reyes looked past him and saw Chief Knox. "Chief, I did not know." "Open the door, Reyes," Knox ordered, his voice cracking. "Buzz us in now." Reyes did not argue. She hit the buzzer. The magnetic lock released with a hard clack. Malcolm pushed through the door and entered the operational heart of the precinct. The bullpen held several officers at desks, all of whom looked up as the tuxedoed man walked into their sanctuary. Confusion moved through the room. Who was this civilian walking into a secure zone like he owned it? Kessler was halfway through eating when he saw the movement and turned in his chair. He saw a tall black man in a tuxedo with fury carved into his face. Kessler did not recognize Malcolm Sterling. He did not follow state politics. He did not care about public officials unless they could help him. He saw only an angry, wealthy black man who thought he could demand respect. Kessler stood and wiped his mouth. He stepped into the aisle, blocking Malcolm's path. "Whoa, hold on there, Slick," Kessler said, puffing out his chest. "You lost? This is a restricted area. You cannot just walk in here like you own the place." Malcolm stopped. He looked at Kessler, then at badge number 4922. The recognition in his eyes was terrifying. It was the look of a predator finally finding its prey. "Officer Bram Kessler," Malcolm said softly. "That is sergeant to you," Kessler sneered, his hand drifting toward his belt in a familiar intimidation gesture. "And unless you want to join your kid in a cell for trespassing, you better turn around and walk out." Behind Malcolm, Chief Knox entered the room. He saw Kessler posturing against the man who had the authority to indict the entire department. "Kessler!" Knox screamed. The sound tore through the room. Kessler blinked and looked over Malcolm's shoulder. "Chief? What are you doing here?" Knox rushed forward, forcing himself between Malcolm and Kessler. He looked at his sergeant with a mixture of rage and terror. "Step back!" Knox spat. "Stand down right now!" "Chief, I was just handling this civilian. He walked in here demanding—" "This civilian," Knox interrupted, his voice shaking, "is the Attorney General of this state, Malcolm Sterling." The silence that fell over the room was absolute, a physical weight. Kessler froze. His eyes moved from Knox to Malcolm. Then the name landed. Sterling. Camden Sterling. Malcolm Sterling. The blood drained from Kessler's face so fast he turned gray. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Malcolm stepped around the chief and stopped looking at Kessler entirely. He treated him like furniture. "Open the cell," Malcolm commanded. Knox fumbled for his master keys. Yes, sir, right away." "Cell 2!" Reyes called from booking, her voice high with panic. Knox ran to the door, forced the key into the lock, twisted, and swung it open. Malcolm stepped into the doorway. Inside, Camden looked up. He was curled against the wall, holding his ribs. His blazer was torn. Dried blood marked his temple. His eyes were wide, full of trauma and disbelief. When he saw his father standing there in a tuxedo like a guardian angel sent from a ballroom, his composure broke. "Dad," Camden whispered. Malcolm's knees nearly failed him. Seeing his son in a cage, battered and frightened, struck him harder than any blow. The Attorney General vanished. The father took over. Malcolm rushed into the cell and dropped to his knees on the dirty concrete. He wrapped his arms around Camden. "I've got you," he whispered fiercely, pulling his son against him. "I've got you. You are safe." Camden buried his face in his father's jacket and sobbed. The sound was raw and broken, echoing off the steel walls. Malcolm held him tightly, one hand cradling the back of his head. He felt the swelling on Camden's skull. He felt the flinch when his hand brushed his son's ribs. Malcolm closed his eyes. He inhaled the stale air of the cell, the smell of fear. Then he opened his eyes. He looked through the cell door. Kessler stood outside, watching. The arrogance was gone. The bully was gone. All that remained was a man who had finally realized he was standing on the tracks, and the train was not going to stop. Malcolm slowly stood, helping Camden to his feet. He kept an arm around his son's waist to support him as they walked out. In the center of the bullpen, Malcolm stopped. He looked at the chief, then at the officers who were now staring at the floor. Finally, he fixed his gaze on Kessler. "Chief Knox," Malcolm said, his voice ice. "Yes, sir," Knox whispered. "I want this precinct sealed. Nobody leaves. Nobody enters. I want internal affairs here. I want the State Police Forensic Unit to process my vehicle and the alleged evidence." He pointed a shaking finger at Kessler. "And I want him stripped of his badge and gun. Right now." The silence was no longer heavy. It was suffocating. It was the silence of a tomb where a career had just gone to die. Chief Knox's hands shook as he unclipped the radio from Kessler's belt and placed it on the desk. Then he reached for the badge. "Chief," Kessler stammered, "you are letting him do this over a traffic stop? I am your best guy. I bring in the numbers." "Give me the badge, Bram," Knox whispered. He would not look Kessler in the eye. He could feel Malcolm Sterling's gaze burning through him, waiting for one wrong move. Kessler did not move. He looked down at the shield pinned to his chest. Badge number 4922. It was his identity, his power. Without it, he was just a bully in a uniform. "Take it," Malcolm said. The command was not shouted. It landed with the finality of a gavel. Knox reached out and unpinned the badge. The silver shield caught the fluorescent light before he placed it on the desk beside the radio. "Gun," Knox said. Kessler slowly unbuckled his holster and placed the service weapon on the desk. He looked smaller now. His shoulders collapsed inward. The bulk of his body seemed to lose meaning. "Am I under arrest?" Kessler spat, trying to preserve what little dignity remained. "Because I want my union rep." "You will get your rep," Malcolm said, stepping closer while still supporting Camden. "But first we are going to wait for the truth." The precinct was soon swarming, but not with local cops. State police arrived in force, their cruisers blocking the entrance in a wall of blue and gold. They moved with clinical precision, making the local officers look sloppy and exposed. They were not there to assist. They were there to investigate. Internal affairs investigators in cheap suits and heavy briefcases took control of the captain's office. Forensic technicians in white suits photographed the Shelby from every angle, dusted door handles, and bagged evidence. Malcolm sat Camden in a chair in the middle of the bullpen and refused to let him be moved to an interrogation room. A paramedic treated Camden's temple and checked his ribs. Malcolm stood beside his son, tuxedo jacket open, tie loosened, watching every person in the room. A state trooper entered carrying a plastic evidence bag. Inside was the small packet of white powder Vale had claimed to find. "Mr. Attorney General," the trooper said respectfully, "we conducted a preliminary examination of the bag recovered from your vehicle." Kessler, seated on a bench across the room under guard, scoffed. "Waste of time. It was under the seat. The kid's prints will be on it." The trooper ignored him and looked directly at Malcolm. "The outer surface has smudges consistent with handling by Officer Vale," the trooper reported. "However, we found a partial thumbprint trapped beneath the adhesive tape sealing the bag." The room went deadly quiet. "Under the tape?" Malcolm asked, eyes narrowing. Yes, sir. That indicates the print was left by the person who packaged the narcotics, not someone who merely held or transported the bag. The trooper turned toward Kessler and held up a digital scanner. Officer Kessler, thumb. Kessler went pale. I handled the bag after it was found. That proves nothing. If your print is under the seal, Malcolm said, his voice cutting through the room like a scalpel, it proves you sealed the bag. It proves possession. And since you claimed you found it in my son's car, it proves fabrication of evidence. Kessler did not move. Malcolm turned his gaze toward the rookie. Vale stood in the corner, shaking like a leaf. He looked at Kessler, then at the Attorney General, then at the terrifying possibility of federal prison. Officer Vale, Malcolm said softly. Vale jumped. You have one chance, Malcolm said. Right now, you are a rookie. You followed orders. But if you lie to me, if you cover for him, I will make sure you spend years in a cell beside him. He stepped closer. Did my son have drugs in that car? Vale looked at Kessler. Kessler glared back, silent threat burning in his eyes. Do not rat on me, Kessler growled. Vale looked at Camden. He saw the blood on the student's face. He saw the future he was about to throw away for a man who bullied him every day. No, Vale whispered. Speak up, Malcolm commanded. No, Vale shouted, tears filling his eyes. No, sir. The car was clean. Sergeant Kessler had the bag in his vest pocket. I saw him take it out before he leaned under the seat. He told me to turn off my body cam. He told me to write it up. You lying little rat, Kessler roared, lunging from the bench. 2 state troopers slammed him against the wall before he could take a full step. His face hit the cinder block with a sickening crack. Cuff him, the lead trooper ordered. Kessler screamed obscenities as his arms were forced behind his back. The metal cuffs clicked shut. It was the same sound Camden had heard before. This time it sounded like justice. Bram Kessler, the trooper recited. You are under arrest for perjury, filing a false report, fabrication of evidence, assault, and deprivation of civil rights under color of law. As they dragged Kessler past the desks, he locked eyes with Malcolm Sterling. You think this is over? Kessler screamed, spit flying from his mouth. I am a cop. The Union will not touch you, Malcolm said calmly. And neither will a jury. I will personally oversee the prosecution. I will make sure you spend the rest of your sentence watching daylight through iron bars. They hauled him out. The doors shut. The precinct became quiet again. Malcolm turned to Chief Knox. Knox looked like a ghost. I expect your resignation on my desk, Malcolm said, or I launch a corruption probe into this department so deep it makes history. Knox nodded slowly. He knew when he was beaten. Yes, sir. Malcolm turned to Camden. The paramedic had finished. Ready to go? Malcolm asked, his voice softening. Camden stood. His legs were shaky, but he stood tall. He looked at the officers around the room, the ones who had laughed, the ones who had watched, the ones who had done nothing. They all looked away, ashamed. Yeah, Dad, Camden said. Let's go home. They walked out of the precinct together. The cool night air felt clean compared to the stale rot inside. The Shelby was being loaded onto a flatbed by state police for secure transport. Dad, Camden said, looking at the car. The fender, the hood. He dented it when he slammed me. I'm sorry. I know how much you love that car. Malcolm stopped. He reached out and adjusted Camden's collar, brushing dust from his son's shoulder. Then he looked at this bruise forming on Camden's temple, and his eyes filled with pain and fierce love. Camden, Malcolm said, pulling his son into a hug. That car is just metal and rubber. You can replace a fender. You can rebuild an engine. But I cannot replace you. He kissed his son's forehead. Let the car burn for all I care. I got back the only thing that matters. Malcolm opened the door of the chief's SUV, which he had taken for the ride home. Then he managed a tired, genuine smile. Let's get some ice for that eye. And maybe we work on your defense attorney skills. You forgot to demand a specific statute during intake. Camden gave a short laugh of relief. I'll study up. As they drove away, leaving the flashing lights of the precinct behind them, the balance of the world shifted slightly back into place. It was not perfect. It was not fair that justice required a title, a tuxedo, and a father powerful enough to make an entire precinct tremble. But for that night, The good guys had won, and the bad guys learned a lesson they would never forget. The story of Camden Sterling is fictional, but the fear behind it is real. It highlights a terrifying reality. Unchecked power breeds corruption, and the thin blue line can sometimes become a wall that blocks the truth. In this story, justice was served because Camden had a lifeline, a father with the power to fight back. But it leaves one painful question behind. What happens to the sons and daughters who do not have an attorney general on speed dial? What happens to the voices crying out in the dark with no one powerful enough to listen? Justice should never be a privilege reserved for the connected. It should be a right that belongs to everyone. Officer Kessler thought he was the law. He forgot that the law was watching him too. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, hit the like button. It helps more people see this content. What would you have done in Camden's position? Would you have stayed calm, or would you have fought back? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories where justice is served cold, subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.